Have you ever heard of a restaurant guaranteeing servers a 20% tip on every single check on one side of the establishment, yet having absolutely no gratuity added to large parties on the other side of the restaurant? Welcome to Bonefish Grill. Have you ever heard of a restaurant making a cook clock out and go home in the middle of the dinner rush just because he's about to go into overtime and then having to go on a wait as a result, even though there's empty tables ready to be sat and hungry guests ready to sit in them? Welcome to Bonefish Grill. Hey, my name is Joe Pippin. I'm from the Augusta, Georgia area, home of the Masters Golf Tournament. See, right there, that place? Yeah. I'm actually an attorney, so if the law be trippin', you call Joe Pippin. I digress. I actually worked at Bonefish Grill for years from before I ever was a lawyer, but continue to help out on the side just because I love the people and it's nice to have some extra travel money. You may have eaten there before and enjoyed some really good food. What you probably don't know is that Bonefish Grill only pays servers $2.13 an hour, at least in states like Georgia and South Carolina that don't have a higher minimum wage for tipped employees. And yes, sadly, it is legal for them to pay this. The Fair Labor Standards Act set this rate 34 years ago, way back in 1991. At the time, $2.13 was half the federal minimum wage of $4.25. Shockingly, it has never been raised since. And I looked this up. Back in 1991, a gallon of gas was $1.14 a gallon, milk $1.05 a gallon, and a dozen eggs, $1.11 for a dozen eggs. You think prices have changed a little bit since then? So at $2.13 an hour, a server's entire wages all go to taxes. So the only money he or she brings home is from tips. Now you probably know that a lot of restaurants add an automatic gratuity to large parties. What you may not know is that Bonefish Grill does not. That is, unless you're in the private dining room. Then they add a nice 20% gratuity every single time. The private dining room can be booked for large groups. So part of the restaurant has gratuity and part of the restaurant does not. Sound ridiculous? I agree. Now, Bonefish will tell you this is because people reserve that room in advance and agree to the gratuity in their contract. But as a lawyer, I know that there are explicit and implicit contracts. For example, when you go to the barbershop or the salon and you sit down in the chair, it is implied that you are going to pay when they finish. You didn't physically sign a contract, but it's implied by your conduct. So if you go to a restaurant and they have an automatic gratuity notice at the bottom of their menu and say 18, 20, 25% will be added to all large parties, then by dining at that establishment, you implicitly agree to those conditions. In Augusta, the T-Bone Steakhouse directly across the street has a gratuity notice on their menu. So why doesn't Bonefish? You probably don't know that Bonefish servers have to tip out other employees like the bartenders and hosts to help compensate them. What does this mean? It means that a portion of every single check is going to be taken out of that server's earnings and tipped out to the hosts and bartenders, whether that server gets a good tip, a bad tip, or no tip. Confusing? I know. I'm a visual learner, so let me show you. Now, when I left Bonefish some months ago, the tip out was 7% of all food and drink sales. So for every $100 in food and drink sales you had to give $7 to the restaurant, whether you got a good tip, bad tip, or no tip at all. Quick example. I once had a large party. They had a $700 check. They left me a $40 tip, which is about 5%. The 7% tip out to Bonefish meant I owed $49, which left me at minus $9. In other words, I owed the restaurant $9 out of my pocket after taking care of the large party all evening. I wrote the company a letter when I left explaining how all the servers I talked to hated this system because they often owed the restaurant money after a large party as a result. No one wrote me back, but I did hear from friends that the company was going to be making some changes, so I held off on making this video, but unfortunately the only change they made was to lower the tip out from 7% down to 3%. So let's take a look at my party under the new system. $700 check, $40 tip, 5%, 3% tip out now. The server does get a tip, but it's only $19 for taking care of a large party all evening. I'll give Bonefish a little credit because 3% is better than 7%, but it still doesn't change the fact that servers have to take money out of their pocket to cover those zero tip large parties. And if you think it doesn't happen, let me tell you, it happens all the time. Sadly, there's a lot of trashy people out there. If you're one of them, don't be like that. Change your ways. If you get good service, tip your server at least 20%. Now you're probably thinking, well, If a large party stiffs them, at least all the other tables will make up for it. See, that's the problem. When you have a large party, Bonefish usually holds your other tables open because they know you can't give great service to the large party and all your other tables at the same time. So that large party is usually all you have while they're there, and it will literally make or break your night. Now, folks, servers are absolutely not allowed to discuss these policies with guests. I was told many times if you do, you can be subject to termination. But at the end of the day, I don't think you really have a choice. And it's not just Bonefish. I called Carrabba's and Outback as well, which are under the Bloomin' Brands umbrella. Same thing, $2.13 an hour in Georgia, no automatic gratuity on large parties. So I think you have to let your tables know, because I promise you, most people don't know this stuff. I started telling large parties and they usually thanked me because they thought the tip was included. It's funny, I had a group one time and I politely told them it wasn't included, and a gentleman spoke up and said, "Yes, it is. We were in that room back there the other night and there was 20% on the check." I said, "Oh, no, sir, they do in that room, but not out here." He looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, "You mean they include the tip in there, but not out here?" That's correct. He looked down. He's like, "Man, you're right. Why would they do that?" Beats me. Another thing you may not know is if you ever go to Bonefish and you see several empty tables, yet your total will be 30, 45-minute wait, there's a decent chance that's because someone was about to go into overtime and they made them clock out. I remember when I discovered this firsthand. I was at home working on a motion for a client, and they called and begged me to come in because they were short-staffed and didn't have a closer, and I have a big heart. I said, "Okay, fine, I'll come in." I walk in, and a dear friend of mine says, "Oh, good, you're here. You're my relief. They're transferring my tables to you. Come, let me introduce you." I said, "Whoa, is everything okay? Do you have a family emergency? You feeling sick or something?" He said, No. I'm about to be in overtime, and they're making me clock out and go home." I said, "Are you freaking kidding me? They pulled me off a summary judgment motion for this?" He's like, "I'm really sorry, man. They said I must clock out." So then I'm having to go over to the table and say, "Good evening, folks. I'm Joe. I'll be pinch hitting this evening because your server's about to be in overtime, and apparently that's completely unacceptable." Another example, we were really busy and go in the kitchen and hear the GM tell one of the cooks to clock out for the same reason. And I said, "Wait, you're sending him home right now?" She said, "Do you think I want to send him home in the middle of this rush? Now I'm down a grill cook, but if he hits overtime, corporate will tear me a new one and say I don't know how to manage my store, and I don't need that kind of stress right now." Whew, okay. I'm like, "But he can make way more food than the little bit of overtime you'll have to pay him." She said, "I don't have a choice." She told the host to go on a wait, even though we had tables available. I like how one manager put it. She called it a false wait because we didn't really have to go on a wait. But when you're down a cook, you have to slow down the orders coming in the kitchen. And then how do you think the guests feel when they see tables available, yet they're told they have to wait? They're like, I can't just sit at that table right there." No, sir, you cannot. And please don't blame in-house management if you witness this. Multiple managers from different stores would love to change these policies, and I know they would because they've told me. But what can they do? They care about their job, understandably. They're working really hard and they're doing the best they can. And you're probably thinking, "Joe, you're not in F&B anymore, food and beverage. Why make the video? What do you care?" And yes, I've got plenty of clients and people to take care of. But, when I see people not being treated in a manner I believe they should be, especially when they mean a lot to me, I got to say something. It really, really bothers me. And not just people that I know, people at other stores I've never even met, because I know they're working hard too. And you're running around and you don't get to sit down, and being in a restaurant's a tough job. I'm making this video for the single mother who busted her tail all night long taking care of a large party that just stiffed her, so now she has to take money out of her purse and pay the restaurant, and she's sitting in the back with her head in her hands crying, trying to figure out how she's going to pay rent and feed her kids. And yes, I saw that happen way too often. I'm making this video for the cook who would desperately love to work some overtime to help offset all these higher prices these days, but he's not allowed to, even though the restaurant's busy and they could really use his help because he can crank out food like it's nobody's business. That's who this video's for. Now, I already know the powers that be at Bonefish will see this video and their response will probably be something like, "At Bonefish Grill, we care deeply about our employees. Our staff is what drives our success." And to that, I say, if you really do care about your employees, then prove it. Why not pay your employees a penny more than the federal government makes you? And I've been told that if they have to pay servers more, they're going to have to raise their prices as a result. Well, guess what? The prices went up many times while I worked there. Server wages didn't go up one dime. Why not put a 20% automatic gratuity on every large party, not just in one room? It'll help your servers out. I mean, doesn't it bother you to know that server works really hard, gives great service, and then gets stiffed and has to take money out of their own pocket and pay the restaurant. And of course, I don't think there should be any abuse of the clock or, excessive overtime. But, if the restaurant's busy and could really use someone's help, why not allow a little bit here and there? The restaurant makes more money, people make more, everyone wins. How about this one? Bonefish likes to promote Employee Appreciation Day, encouraging guests to give a gift card to show their gratitude for their employees. But did Bonefish do anything for us for Employee Appreciation Day? I gotta say, in my humble opinion, encouraging others to do something for their employees that day, but not doing anything for your own employees, seems a bit hypocritical. Guys, look, I'd sign an affidavit or put my hand on the Bible and tell you everything that I'm saying in this video is 100% true. I can't make this stuff up. Sending a great employee home in the middle of a busy shift because he's going to hit overtime, gratuity in this room but not that room. I mean, that's the most arbitrary and capricious tipping policy I've ever heard. And I haven't worked at every Bonefish, obviously, but whenever I've aired my grievances to management, including corporate management, I've been told this is company policy, that's Bonefish policy, that's corporate policy. I even had a manager from corporate tell me, look, if we guaranteed you a tip on large parties, we're afraid you wouldn't give good service. Oh, really? Because I'm pretty sure if you give bad service, you're gone. And by the way, they don't get a lot of complaints about bad service in the private dining room, so there goes that argument. But hey, feel free to go to Bonefish and ask your server what their hourly wage is. Ask how they feel about large parties in the main dining room, not the gratuities included section. Ask if they ever get stiffed on large parties. Ask if they got anything for Employee Appreciation Day. Ask the manager if they prefer to go on a false wait or would rather spend a little on overtime to crank out more food. Actually, that's a question for the shareholders. How is it maximizing profits to not seat as many people as possible, even if you have to spend a little bit on overtime in the process? My hope is that if enough people say something, these policies will change. They wouldn't listen to me, so maybe they'll listen to you. Do I think they will? I don't know. I really don't. But I hope they do, and I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you if you like this video, and thank you so much for watching. Take care.